Okay, so random effects. So random effects, the difference or the issue of that is the IVs. And it's how we select the IVs. Based on what we've done so far, we have been dealing with fixed effects. So all our IVs are fixed levels. It's psychodynamic versus CBT. It's just these two groups, men versus women, treatment versus control. And random effects is that it's not just these 2 or 3 levels. The levels are random, randomly decided.
Wow.
So and then the levels are replaceable. So each condition should be chosen randomly from a set of conditions and therefore replaceable by another acceptable condition. And the main reason is that we can generalize beyond our conditions. So like if we do a study that says CBT is better than humanistic, can we generalize that to DBT is better than person-centered? No, right? It's just fixed with the 2 conditions that we examine. But with the random effects, it's random, and then the main goal is that we're generalizing it. It's sort of like when we're doing a study, we take a sample from the population and then examine the results based on that sample, and then we want to generalize it back to the population. So that's sort of parallel to the sampling, but this is the design aspect of the IV. And so fixed effects, they have all the conditions of interest included. In random effects, all the conditions are not included. And for fixed effects, the researcher makes a decision to include the particular condition, is only interested in these conditions. So when we're examining CBT versus psychodynamic versus waitlist, we're just examining these 3. But for random effects, like we may randomly pick a sample of available conditions. So this is not sample, but it's the condition, the IV level, and is interested in generalizing the findings beyond those conditions. So for example, there's 50 available treatment conditions, and the researcher may randomly pick 10. And then based on those 10, generalize it to a broader set of conditions. Okay, so here's an example. Suppose we're interested in whether faith maturity varies across churches in the U.S. So we just want to see if different churches have different levels of faith maturity among their congregation. So this question is broad, it's general, it doesn't specify which church, which denomination. It's different from whether Presbyterian churches have higher religious maturity than Baptist churches. Those are specific, we're just interested in Presbyterians and Baptists. This is like, in general, do churches differ? And so there's thousands of churches in the US, and we're not going to collect data from every church. So what we do is we randomly select 10 out of all the churches, and because we only have time and money to test 10. And then based on those 10, we select populations, congregation members to complete our survey, and then we look at whether these 10 differ, and if they do, we generalize it like, okay, not everyone who goes to church, their spiritual maturity level is the same. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the main reason for using random effects. So in this sample, of course, this is a random effect design. What is our IV? Churches. Different churches. What is our DV?
Spiritual maturity.
Spiritual faith maturity. What is our null hypothesis?
There is no difference
No
between
difference?
churches.
Is any one of these churches of particular interest to us?
No.
No, we're not interested in those churches.
Man.
So this is a summary of the reasons that we use random effects. Is we don't know the right conditions. Sometimes drug studies, treatment intensities, we're not sure whether how often or how long the effects take place. So we just randomly pick some and then try to generalize, see if there's any patterns. Sometimes it's not about not knowing, but we don't have the resources to include all the conditions. So pragmatic constraints, funding's complexity,
Complexity.
Huh?
Complexity.
Yeah, complexity.
That one.
Yep.
Thank you. And then the third one is we want to generalize beyond the condition. So these are the reasons we use random effects. And here's some pros and cons. The main pro is generalizability beyond the selected conditions. And these are some cons. It's usually less powerful. Random effect designs use different error terms to reduce type 1 errors. However, one-way random effect designs are identical to fixed effects. So I don't know if you're confused, but first I read design, what does this mean? So what it means is that if you run SPSS, you put your DV in the DV box, and then you put your IV in the fixed factor box, which is what we do for one-way ANOVA, you get results. And if you're curious, you put the same IV into random effects. Say, oh, this is random effect. It's not one-way ANOVA. The results will be the same, the F value, the P value. So it doesn't really make much of a difference or any difference when you're doing it one-way ANOVA. But usually it has more of an effect when there's mixed models. So this mixed model is different from the mixed model that we were talking about in terms of one IV being between group, one IV being repeated measure. This is like one IV being random effects and one IV being mixed effect, fixed effects. So there's mixed in different ways. So this is a commonly used design, and which we can do in SPSS. And there's other more complicated, like a random effect and a IV and a repeated measure IV. This will be too complicated to simply run in SPSS. We're not going to run these, but one of the things I want to introduce is nested designs. So in the future, if you hear nested designs or hear designs that resemble nested situations, this is a situation where we used a mixed design where one variable is fixed, one is random. So I'm going to give you some examples of what a nested design looks like and what kind of situations nested designs might come up. So this is an example. We're looking at 3 training programs. And then there's 15 groups of students. And then we're going to randomly assign these 15 groups of students into these 3 programs. So there's going to be 5 groups of students in each of the training programs. And so our interest is which training program is most effective. So that's a fixed effect. We only have 3 specific training programs. It could be online, in person, and self-study, something like that. And then there's another IV which is nested, which is the groups nested within the program. So this is a random effect IV. So in this situation, we have 15 groups of students. And these groups of students, they're tied together. So it's like you as a class. So if I want to do an experiment between different psychology teaching methods or testing methods, examining methods, you are tied together as a class. So you are a unit when I do the assignment. I can't randomly assign each of you to different conditions. I can only randomly assign the whole class to receive certain conditions. So because you're tied together, you are nested under a larger situation. So there might be, let's see, okay, group tests versus individual tests. And so if I'm doing group tests, I need to do group tests for the whole class. It's harder than like, oh, you're randomly assigned a group. If you're an individual, I think it will be unfair. So you will be, like this class will be either under group tests or individual tests, but you are nested together as a whole class. So this is a nested design. So the nested IV, which is a random IV, would be like the groups. And then, and the cases are not groups, the cases are individual students. So like 6 of you are individual 6 cases on SPSS, but you are within this group of this class. So this is a nested design, and this is a situation where we use like one random effect IV and then one fixed effect IV. And then the results will be different now. It's not identical to using factorial design. So, why do we have nested models, or when do these happen? And one is like, especially for those doing educational studies, like they implement educational policies or teaching methods in classroom settings, they are nested under, like the classes, the students are nested under their classes and under the condition. So they can only say, okay, there's 5 classes in this grade, we're gonna randomly assign 2 to receive this, 3 as control groups, but the students are all within the classroom. So this is a nested setting. And also if we're doing treatment on group therapy, okay, we have a, unless we randomly assign people to different groups, but if they're already together as a group, group therapy, they're nested under the condition their group is assigned to the individual. So that's also another situation. And another one is more related to marketing research. So if we were going to do research on cars, the Honda CR-V is under Honda, so there's no Honda for Toyota, but there's a matrix for Toyota. So these different brands, different models are nested under the brands. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is also a nested design. So this is like a nested situation where we examine the research question of evaluating speed of skiing as a result of the length of classes. So we have full day classes and half day classes. So this is the fixed IV. And then we have different groups. So we have 2 half day groups in terms of skiing lessons. And so there's 3 people in each class, in each group. And this is the random effects IV. So these are randomly, the effects are randomly assigned. We don't predetermine them, and we're not really interested in them. We're interested in the fixed effects. So in this design, the fixed IV is the length of class. The nested IV is the group of skiers, groups of skiers. The sample size is 3 for each level of that DV. And the DV, each level of the B, what's B? Okay, B groups. And then DV, outcome variable, is how much time it takes to complete the run. Okay.
I
Yeah.
was just gonna remind you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So we're done with nested. Any or the random effects. Any questions about random effects or